talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. It is Wednesday night. Wednesdays are the new Tuesdays with these fixtures, Liam. But good evening to you, mate. Good to see you. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, and I'm quite enjoying the fact that your little new intro, you get a little bit more of that Long Sand song. It's really good.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, there's a few people said that, like they're amazed. Yeah, it's great. We're getting a little bit extra. Well, you're going to get an hour of the Long Sands on Saturday because we're going to do an hour with Trevor and Ian from the Long Sands at 11:15 on Saturday morning for an hour. We're going to play a couple of their videos and have a bit crack with them and see what they've been doing throughout the lockdown period. I did interview them on Instagram when I started this whole thing off over a year ago. We had the lads on and doing a couple of live tracks, etc. But yeah, I'm going to play a couple of the videos, have a chat with the guys. They're both Newcastle fans as well, so it'll be good to have them on. But yeah, the fact that the people really like the music is good. And, just find them on SoundCloud or some of the other music providers, iTunes, etc., Spotify. You'll be able to find some of the Long Sands on there, and of course the playlist on the channel as well. We've got the Long Sands on there as well, got some of the videos on there. See if you can spot the Newcastle player that makes an appearance, the former Newcastle player that makes an appearance in one of the videos. It's well worth a watch. But as always, we're going to pick Liam's brains. He's going to have plenty questions. There's plenty already lined up. I can tell you that now. We'll just go straight into the comments. Mike Jen says, "Evening lads, if Fulham win tonight, we're doomed. We're all doomed." Yeah, I mean it's a big game tonight, of course. Fulham and Burnley, both two teams are in form. And it is going to be interesting. But let's touch on Tom's first comment today. He says Bruce's future as Newcastle manager remains under no immediate threat, despite Newcastle slipping to fourth bottom in the Premier League. He's of course taken that from a news report today, Liam. And it appears that Mike Ashley is going to stick with Bruce, which we all expected. Been a bit of movement of planes, etc. I've noticed the plane spotters have been out on force on Twitter. But yeah, it's no surprise, is it, that Mike Ashley isn't going to replace the manager?
No, the last time I had conversations of this nature, which was a few weeks back, was that Steve Bruce is safe as houses, really. I think we've got Steve Bruce at the end of the season. That's where I find the Bruce out stuff a little bit tiresome because it just isn't going to change, unfortunately. The position that the club find themselves in, that doesn't mean that I agree with it. It doesn't mean that I think he should remain. I'm certainly not nailing me colours to that mast. But they're going to roll the dice. They're going to risk this chance that they could have changed things short term to secure the long term. Maybe the 1.5 million it may well have cost to pay him and his coaches off. Bringing a manager in probably around the same, if not a little bit more. So maybe it's a £5 million outlay. They're risking. Mike Ashley's really rolling the dice on this. We know he's a guy who likes the roulette tables. He's really banking that this is going to work because he's high rolling here. He's rolling with sort of more than £300 million worth of his own cash that could be coming in. Potentially with regards to Takeover. It's a big risk, I know it was tongue-in-cheek, that first comment, that we're doomed. Look, I think I was on here last week and I said exactly the same as I'm going to say now, is that Fulham's last chance saloon probably, and this was what I said last week, if everyone goes back, is this week. Newcastle United had 2 really tough games, and Fulham had 3 winnable games. Fulham's run of games after they play Crystal Palace is a horror show. It really is. It's if they don't get the points and close the gap now, it's unlikely they ever will. So I did say last week, everybody needs to remain calm because the gap would probably close. Now I understand if everybody loses their shit tonight, if it goes down to 4 points. I do understand that. At the moment, I've seen some of the comments on Sunday and I get everybody's on tenterhooks and it means so much to everybody. I get that. But it's almost like the schizophrenic nature of social media in a lot of ways. Newcastle United had not kicked a ball as of Sunday night. This is before Chelsea. And the last time they did kick a ball, it was raw emotion. It was passion. It was It was the Southampton result. And then Fulham won a game in between. That was all that happened. Fulham won one game and closed the gap. And it went from being, oh, we're definitely staying up, to some people saying we're staying up, we're never coming back, we're doomed, this, that, and the other. Newcastle hadn't kicked the ball at that point. Now I get they didn't play great on Monday night as well. There were some negatives to take from that. They did try to play the same system. Now, I've tried to explain this in a number of ways to people I've spoken to in the last 24, 48 hours or whatever it's been since the game, that I think Steve Bruce was right to go with the same team and system. That was my opinion. But I'm not a tactician and I'm not a football manager. Now, I think better tacticians and actual football managers probably could have looked at that Chelsea system and seen how they play with width and how some of their front players, such as Werner, drop out and double up and make it really wide. And Newcastle play very narrow. Maybe he could have looked at that and thought, you know what, for this one game, we'll maybe change it. But that's why I'm not a football manager. I actually thought it was the right thing to do. Bring Dwight Gale in, play that system, go about it the way we've always done, play your own game. But like I say, I'm not a tactician. It's not my trade, and I'm not a football manager. So I think I was a little bit disappointed in that it was so easy for that 45 minutes for Chelsea to open Newcastle United up. There was improvements in the second half. I know Bruce, it's hard because I think what he said was probably about right. There were some improvements, not massive improvements. Didn't get any points, didn't score any goals. And that's facts. But there were little bits, and I did think they played some okay stuff, and maybe could have nicked a goal here or there, but it's not good enough. I find the schizophrenic nature of social media quite frustrating in some ways. That we can go from absolute highs to absolute lows within a heartbeat. It is quite concerning, the nature of some of it. Look, it is what it is. We're living in really strange times where we're living in really strange Newcastle United times, with everything up in the air, with everything mental off the field, frustrating for the large part of the last 18 months on it, to the point of anger. And look, I do really get people's frustrations and upset with what they've been saying. I do think, despite the points tally, and look, if tonight goes badly, it could go badly. That's not beater on the bush. It could go badly. But if we're purely focused and analysing Newcastle United and their recent performances, and I include Chelsea in that, I include the Crystal Palace defeat. So we go through all of those 4 games. From a tactical sense, from a goal-scoring sense, I would say this Newcastle United team, even without Callum Wilson, probably looks a little more like staying up than the team did a month ago with Callum Wilson in it. We didn't look like we'd get a point. Now, I'm concerned that Callum Wilson isn't going to be there for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Fingers crossed it isn't as bad an injury as we all hoped, and he can get back a little sooner than that because they desperately do need him. But look, I think there is still enough in this. I'm not going to sit here tonight and pander that narrative that I think we're absolutely doomed, because I genuinely don't. I think there's an idea in, look, I could be totally proven wrong by people might watch this tomorrow. People may well be doing that, and the result may have already been in, and the gap might be 4 points. Now, I can't do anything about that, not in Newcastle United. But what I would say is they have to deal with the pressure this season, because there might be pressure coming in the next few weeks. But there are games that Newcastle United have between now and the end of the season that are definitely winnable, even without Callum Wilson. And they can get results. And they've proven in recent times that they can go out and get results, because Callum Wilson wasn't on the field. And Newcastle United were still all over Southampton creating chances in that game until they had the ridiculous sending off and then the 9 men. So I don't think it's the disaster scenario that everybody's painting out from a Newcastle sense. But if you look at the slightly bigger picture, they've created this mess themselves. They're only in this position where Fulham have been rubbish since November, and there's only a 10-point gap down to a 7-point gap, because Newcastle haven't been winning the games themselves. They've been on an absolutely awful run. So they're kind of in the same position they are. But I'm not going to sit on here tonight and be the absolute doom monger that maybe some people have been portraying on social media. And I get that. I'm not criticising. I get the negativity, because there's been so much. But I still think there's enough there for this team to stay up. And believe me, anybody who knows me knows I'm not an eternal optimist. And if I'm saying that, then there's got to be some hope.
Okay. Jordan says, all right, lads, I know you hate the takeover questions, but what is actually going on? We've got yacht watchers, plane watchers now. How many more dots is there to join? Cheers.
Plenty more dots to join. Cheers for the for the message. We don't hate takeover questions for a start. We're happy. We've talked about them for months. We're happy to continue talking about it. But there are a lot of dots still to join. Things are slow. Things are quiet. Things are happening though. It's all legal. We're in legal to and fro at the moment, there will be a break in that. Look, I think there's been some people recently building a lot of people's hopes up, and it actually frustrates me as well that I see people on social media, these in the know accounts, who'll come up with these sort of grand ideas about yachts and planes. And look, the plane watching was good in a non-COVID world. Plane watching still works in a transfer window because Mike Ashley does fly signings up in his jet, in his helicopter. He does do that kind of thing. The fact that two rich men's yacht and plane are in a really, really nice place and they're bending the rules because they're probably not doing business and they're there at the same time is a coincidence. It is a coincidence. It is not. Look, if it was takeover related, why wouldn't they do it over Zoom? Why would they meet on a beach in the Bahamas? It's lunacy. Everything that's been done, and here's the biggest point in all of this, is that PCP are doing the deal. PCP are the people who deal with Mike Ashley. And that's all done. It's effectively signed and sealed to a point whereby Mike Ashley has to deliver a reworking of the owners and directors test, a potential reapplication of that on this deal. The Rubens effectively at this moment in time are a silent partner. They're not the people driving this deal. So why would Mike Ashley be meeting the Rubens? Why would he be doing it in the Bahamas or wherever it may be? Sorry, in the Caribbean, when he could be doing it over Zoom, which is where all this has been done. Remember, the arbitration hearings, any court proceedings that will go forward, are not going to be done in person in this current climate. They will be done over Zoom. They'll be done digitally, online. So why would they need to meet? To shake hands on the beach over a cocktail? None of it makes sense. And anybody who tells you that it is making sense is making it up. And I hate to see Newcastle United fans led down the garden path. There's been so many people accuse me, Steve, others of leading people down the garden path. Listen to us when I say this. Stop reading in the nose. I did say it on the first day of this year, and it was my New Year's message. Be careful who you trust and be careful who you believe.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've seen it. I've got to be honest, I've stopped even commenting on them, mate. I really have. But look, I've said this. I bumped into somebody out on my daily walk today, and I stood and talked for about 10 minutes, and I said exactly the same to him. You know, in essence, you know, it'll all come out in the wash. Eventually, you know, everything will come out and we'll know exactly who was telling lies and who was being truthful, mate. And, you know, I've just got a feeling that, you know, the silence is golden. And I've always said that. I feel that, you know, there will be an end game and it'll happen before, you know, before we enter the new season. That's certainly got to be the, you know, the focus, I think. But, you know, I just hope it gets done. I think last week I was suffering a bit of takeover fatigue, you could call it, really. Do you know what I mean? I'm just sick of it all. And the football doesn't help. The results are awful.
Yeah.
You know, and Steve Bruce continues to see positives in absolute negatives. So, you know, I think that's probably played its part. But, you know, it will all come out in the wash. That's where we're at. So hope that answers your question. You can see there, NUFCmatters.com is live. I've got to say a big thank you to John from QTech, who has taken it upon himself to knock up a website. He's been doing the T-shirts, etc. for the food bank. So if you get on there, it's a very basic website, but everything's under one roof now. Get yourself on there, NUFCmatters.com. If you want to buy a T-shirt, want to buy a mug, they are all on there. So thank you very much to John for taking up a bit of his time out of his own pocket to do that as well. Thank you very much, mate. Spider VPN, of course, are our sponsors for this month, and they are sponsoring the StreamYard application. Big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, of course, makers of pool tables and snooker tables, and now website in Mortal's End, Newcastle, and of course they do our T-shirts which you can buy on that website. And a big shout out to John from Jab Signature, who makes all the flyers and the logos. So plenty of questions, plenty of points coming in from lots of people, and Peter Robson, he did ask. I've got to get back to his question now. Bear with us for 2 seconds. Yeah, it is on YouTube. Yeah, he goes, I know I'm way too early. He came in right at the start, and it's at the top of the YouTube. It hasn't come up on the StreamYard application. He says, I know I'm way too early, but a question that hopefully Liam will answer. What does being a Newcastle fan mean to you on a personal level, Liam?
I suppose that's quite a good question, quite deep. It means everything to me. It's not only is it my job, it's me life effectively. It's my main interest in my life. Always has been. I was taken to Newcastle United as a really, really young lad. Went to my first game at sort of 3-4 years old, with my dad and my granddad, and ever since then I've always lived and loved Newcastle United. I came into the industry with the idea that I wanted to eventually write and talk about Newcastle United as not just a hobby, not just something you do down the pub, not something you do with your mates or your family at the match, but to do it as a career. And look, I accept I've been lucky enough to go along and be able to do that. Hopefully this is the end of the journey. But of course, it means absolutely everything. It's a great question, that really is, and it's. Look, you get some criticism for it sometimes, and I'm actually off this week. I'm not at work. I've took a week off. I'm spending the half term with the kids, and on Monday night, I thought in my head, this is what it means. I was sort of like, do you know what? It's all you talk about. You're working on it all the time. It's taking up so much of your day. It wouldn't harm you not to look at social media and not watch the game, and it wouldn't harm you not to watch the game. I couldn't do it. I couldn't not watch the game. I had to. I tried. I asked myself that question. Oh, just leave it. Just leave it. It'll be fine. They'll probably get beat anyway. I thought, no, I have to watch it. I have to be there. I have to. And it's always been that way wherever I've lived in the country. I've always travelled back for games. Kept my season ticket when I lived in London as well. I travelled up when I could. And yeah, so it means the absolute world to us. As much as it does people out there, and I'd like to think that as a journalist I can also step away from that and be able to write, objectively and be able to sort of be neutral when needed and come at things from a professional angle. So great question, and any more questions like that, I'm happily take them, because it's good to know the sort of man behind the mask, isn't it? It's good to know that that there's a person behind the reporter effectively.
Malky, good to have you on, mate. He says, hi chaps, I've got a hypothetical question for you to consider. If we get taken over and we are relegated, I'd like to ask if the Premier League are found to have been behaving unlawfully, do you think that the new owners will go back to court?
The new owners will go back to court.
Yeah, I'm just going. It's difficult because I was working between the two questions. Hi, chaps. I've got a hypothetical question for you to consider. If we get taken over and we are relegated, I'd like to ask if the Premier League are found to have been behaving unlawfully, do you think the new owners to go back to court?
It's really another absolutely fantastic question, because in my head I've been playing out the idea that if we don't get taken over and get relegated, that almost strengthens Mike Ashley's hand in some ways, that he could go and say, look, I've been desperately trying to get rid of this, and there could be an even bigger suit in that sense, because I do think everybody as part of this there'll be lots of legals, and this will probably go on for years with regard to compensation. Do I think they could? I think they could have a case because they haven't been able to control it. And the control of this has been effectively with the Premier League. But I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not going to go too much down that avenue. It'd be interesting for you to come back on and say what you think. Do you think they would go to court? I think, looking at it from layman's terms, they could potentially have a case, because they've agreed a deal that they're waiting for to be pushed through, that they now have absolutely no control over the club and what they've sort of agreed to buy. Of course, there is the caveat in that they could just pull out and renegotiate a deal. And I would imagine that would be something that probably has to be done And I think there'll be a lot of waiting around to see if Newcastle gets safe as well. I think that's something that can't be taken off the table. But it's all still hypotheticals, unfortunately, and we're still largely waiting for legal proceedings to play out. And the only thing that I can give people guarantee out there is that those legal proceedings are moving. Things are moving. There's not much more you can say than that, because I do get the sense that they're not moving all that quickly. That could change. I said this throughout this. This is the type of process whereby it's been on 1 minute, then off, then on. It can change. Things can move. Something can break. Something can trigger something else. The dominoes fall. Either way. So it's impossible to know. But at the moment, things are moving. They're just not moving as quickly as anybody really wants them to.
Yeah, Burnley 0, Fulham 0, about 20 minutes played in that, and Sunderland are 0-0 as well. They're playing in the Papa John Trophy tonight. I would imagine you need a slice of luck to win that, Liam, with it being the Papa John Trophy.
But
Mike Stewart takes us back to those that great game the weekend against Chelsea. We've tried to avoid it. We've done well. We've managed 20 minutes, but he has asked, is it just me, or should Gale have been playing where Almiron was playing and vice versa against Chelsea? Yeah, I mean, bit of criticism. I mean, when the team sheet comes out, you can always, grasp what, like, the match day panel that we have, was quite happy with it. Everyone was quite happy with the team that he picked. Joe Linton wasn't there. No Andy Carroll. He'd gone for the 3 more attacking players. But then when it unravelled, we probably played as worse in the first half as we have in the season. Second half, Steve Bruce can see the positives. I mean, I wish he wouldn't say I can see the positives when we get beat, because it grinds on fans. But look, it was 0-0 the second half. We didn't collapse like a pack of cards, and the goal difference didn't take a massive smashing. But from everyone's perspective, maybe it's just the formation that suited Wilson just didn't seem to suit Gale.
And I think that's probably conversations that are going to have to be had over the next week or so, because it made what Monday did was made you realise how crucial Wilson is to that system. Dwight Gale is a striker who hasn't often in his career played wide, is a few years older, is not as physical, a little less dynamic, and I think that really told. And as well as that system has worked, with Almiron being a key player in that, Alan St. Maximin being a key player, Willock, Hayden, Shelby at points has been a key player in it, and the fullbacks as well. It really is lacking, severely lacking on that right-hand side. Emil Kraft, the less said about him, the better. And I think there's going to have to be a real rethink there at the right back. I would even consider, potentially going back to the 5, because he just can't be relied upon. He's not a defender who seems to have his body position in the right place when he's squared up with a winger. He always gets beaten. He never stops the cross. And it's quite embarrassing to see, to be honest, that he just gets done every time. And further forward, like I say, Dwight Gale, I think it could be worth a little go, but he just doesn't fit he didn't seem to fit the system. And I would imagine that's not going to be able to change much if he's played in the same position on Sunday night it is against Manchester United. The problem that I had was he seemed stuck to the touchline largely, which Wilson defensively tucks in on that touchline. He'll be an outball physical. He'll sort of run the line between the fullback and the centre half, making him really difficult to pick up. We only seen Dwight Gale do that once. I think it was quite early in the game, actually, where he got in that little channel between the fullback and defender, and he was played through and didn't quite get onto it, if I remember rightly. But we didn't. That's a regular occurrence with Wilson. We didn't see anywhere enough of that with Gale. He seemed largely to be doing a lot of the defending. Look, that could have been because the width that Chelsea had, analysing it, which we are now, he might have been pulled out of a position that he might have wanted to be in. But I just don't think he's quite as dynamic. He's not the same player. He's probably as close to a striker as we've got, but Wilson wasn't playing really as a striker. He was doing a lot of defensive work. He was tucking in, and he was playing, like I say, in between that little corridor between the fullback and the defender, making those diagonal runs, which actually were really difficult for for opposition defenders to pick up. They couldn't pick him because one moment he'd be defending out on the right and then all of a sudden he'd be tucking in and he'd be away. But Gale didn't have that dynamism. He didn't switch between positions. And obviously Newcastle United had less of the ball. They did a lot more defending. They weren't picking the ball up in too high positions as what they have been against lesser teams. Because look, Chelsea are a good side. They probably haven't had the best team, best performance this season under Frank Lampard. But Tuchel seems to be getting the best out of them. And I would imagine they'll probably finish in the top 4 this season. So, nothing really lost in that game. But I would imagine there has to be a rethink. Looking back on it, hindsight's a fantastic thing. I would have picked Dwight Gale, but like I said earlier, I'm not a football manager and I'm not a tactician. But I was happy with the team when I seen the team, being brutally honest, because I had a fear he would opt for Joe Linton, and I really didn't want to see that. I didn't want to see Joe Linton brought back into the side because I don't think Newcastle United have missed him at all, being in that 11. But looking back, you might have said a Ryan Fraser, and I know that's no striker, but you might have said a Ryan Fraser was probably a better pick in that department if you're going to play the system, because at least he's a wide player, can also play as in a front two. But it maybe needs a little bit of a rethink. It could be revisited again. Say when you've got your game against Wolves, it could be revisited again. But again, they play with width. They play with wing backs. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. Newcastle stumbled across a system that really, really works for them. We've tried every system this season, and Graham Jones has come in and worked one that Newcastle United, the players fit really well. I think everybody realised on Monday night just how crucial Callum Wilson is to this team. And he's irreplaceable. He is simply irreplaceable. And if that means they're going to have to now rethink the system, they've got a lot of time to do it. They've got a lot of time between now and Sunday to think things up. Look at how Manchester United play and try and nullify them. Largely, they're going to have to defend a lot better. There's been a lot of, even in this changing system and more attacking options and creating chances in the last few weeks. There's been a lot of defensive errors, a lot of really, really poor defending. I know that was picked up on Monday night by the Sky Sports panel, but really poor mark and Newcastle United looked like conceding goals at will every time Chelsea went forward in that first 45. And I think Chelsea eased off a little bit in the second half, which allowed sort of took away that issue. But yeah, I would think there needs to be a rethink, and I wouldn't surprise me if he probably thinks about going back to a 5.
Okay, Joe Walker just wants to know: are you still confident Newcastle will stay up?
I can't say I'm confident. I have my own doubts, of course. I've been accused by saying things I've said. I've been accused of being positive this week, and I'm not positive about it. I'm really fearful that they could be sucked into something. But I also have a little bit of faith that I don't believe Fulham are going to suddenly turn into Manchester City. They hadn't won a game since November. It's a big ask for them to suddenly win 3 games in a week. Look, it's not out the realms of possibility. It could happen. But then they're going to have to continue as well. They're really going to have to continue with that run because Newcastle's games become a little bit easier, and that's when the pressure will come. The Newcastle are going to have to beat Wolves if they want to stay up. They're going to have to go and beat other teams that they've got in that little run of games that they've got coming up after this difficult spell that they get over. So I'm not confident. You can never be confident because it's not within your realms of power. You can't impact on it. So I can't be confident that they will. But do I believe Newcastle United have got enough quality in their squad, even without Callum Wilson to stay up? Yes, I do. And I think there maybe just needs to be some tweaks made because I think as a striker, they've got a striker in Dwight Gale who, if he can rekindle the kind of form that he had in the last lockdown, can still score goals and will score enough goals for Newcastle United to stay up. But there just needs to be maybe a rethink. And the only worry I would have with Dwight Gale is that we know he's not been a very happy player this season, and rightly so. He hasn't had anywhere near the minutes that somebody who's been effectively been fit since the end of November should have had. He's been one of the lowest used players minutes-wise in the whole squad, down there with an Emil Kraft, and he's a better player than that.
Wayne Bennett saying, would you still play ASM? Yes, he's a great flamboyant player, but with him not providing any defensive input, is he the sort of player we need in a relegation battle, Liam?
Yeah, I would play him. I think he's one of the first names on my team sheet, and I'll quickly explain that. I do get the idea. He doesn't do a lot of defensive work, but when he's on form, he can create and he can cause absolute havoc. And I do think that I do think even when he's not on form, I think there's a fear factor with Alan St-Maximin. So I do think he'll get crowded out of games, but that'll create spaces for other people in that midfield or further forward, because they'll double up on him and they'll stop him doing what he wants to do and create. But Newcastle, they've got to be smart enough to realise that, and the likes of Almiron will get more space, or Gale, or whoever else is playing in those forward areas. But Newcastle look, even when St-Maximin's not playing well, I do think he can tie two men up at times, and I think there's a positive in that.
Okay. Mike Stewart saying the problem is Bruce doesn't manage in real time. He doesn't react in time to changing situations in games. It's like every time he puts out a team that would have won the week before's game. And Wayne did also make a comment about, just to back on what he was saying about ASM, he said, following on from his last comment, the other attacking players like Miggy do track back and help out. So yeah, it can be a bit of a nightmare. But I mean, we've had that with like Ben Arthur, we've had it with Lauren Robert. You know, it is crazy, really. Northeast lad, he says, arguably the split strikers diamond approach might backfire now without Wilson. Gale looked lost on the night. Carroll doesn't fit, and so you're left with Joe Linton, and that's the problem. It comes down to one thing: lack of investment, Liam.
Well, it does, and I think that's why there has to be a little bit of a rethink, because I think the players that were selected you can get a decent side out of them. But again, that's going to be for more qualified people than me or you, Steve, to work a system where Dwight Gale is getting in goal scoring positions and isn't stuck looking like a lost little boy on the right hand side. Yeah.
Train Sun says, anyone else think that on the thumbnail pic for the show, Liam looks like a hybrid of Ryan Taylor and Philip Albert?
That's an interesting one. We'll have to get them to mock one up.
Well, John's the man. Liam, if the takeover goes through, we should have black and white dots on the shirts instead of stripes, says Jason Carter. Local Hero just wants to know, is Nick DeMarco's case in progress, or is it yet to even start?
I can't really comment on that, to be honest.
Dave Cook says, loving Liam's optimism, but there's one big problem. We still have Steve Bruce as manager, which is, a lot of people complain.
No, Dave, you're right. It's not optimism. I think I probably addressed that in the last question. It isn't optimism. I'm not optimistic. And like you say, there is always that problem. And it's right to have the fear when you see a bad performance. I think Newcastle United, even against Chelsea, showed more signs than what they would have earlier this season. I think they were slightly better than and I'm not a Steve Bruce apologist. Anybody who watches this show on a regular basis will know that. But I do think they were slightly better, marginally so. There isn't really positives to take from it. Like, yeah, I get what you're saying, Steve, that you shouldn't come out and it's the use of language. But let's be realistic. Steve Bruce's use of language since he's taken the job has been really awkward, and has dug himself holes left, right and centre. And that's just another way that he's doing that. And yeah, I'm not optimistic. I'm not positive because it is negative. It is a really negative situation Newcastle need to find themselves in. And looking at the bigger picture, there's people fighting in, working hours and upon hours, putting legal arguments and papers together for a better future for this football club. And it feels like it could go up in smoke. It feels like it could just disappear at any one moment this season because, look, I'll go over this again, and I've mentioned it on here. Newcastle United drop out of this division. One of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world is not going to want to buy a second division club in England. They want to walk into there is a reason why Premier League clubs are sought after. And there is also a reason why Newcastle United are probably one of the better ones to buy because they're cheap. It's almost like buying a shell of a football club that you can build in your own model, in your own image almost, with the right people at the football club. But doing that in a second division is not the type of impact that an investment arm, one whose country has had a particularly negative image over the last few years, they want to walk into the Premier League and they want to make a big impact in one of the biggest global brands on the planet, which is the Premier League. They want to have a big impact in that. They're going to want to walk into the Championship. So this idea that the takeover will still go ahead if Newcastle United get relegated, I do not believe is something that will happen. Look, if it happens, I would nearly said there I'd love to be proved wrong. I really wouldn't love to be proved wrong because I don't want Newcastle United to ever be outside the top division. it's largely a wilderness. When you're outside the top division, you get some people, but it's fun. You have the laugh. It goes back to real football. No, it doesn't go back to real football. It's rubbish. It's a wilderness. You're never on the telly. You're never talking about it. It's the end. You never, there's no match of the day. There's no, not even a passing comment on Sky or whatever. It is an absolute wilderness. I do not want Newcastle United to go back there. So I don't want to be proved wrong, but I don't believe that a deal will go ahead unless Newcastle United are a top division club. And I think it could easily be dragged out until that safety in the top division, if it ever comes, would be secured.
Mark Cooper just says, is it right that BN Sports is back up, Liam? We saw a bit of that, didn't we, in the papers? That there seems to be just a spin on an old story for me.
I don't really know where it's come from. Like I say, I've been off this week, but my knowledge is that hasn't moved on. And I think a lot of people are waiting around to see what does happen in that situation. I think I'm not one to tell the deal makers what to do, but I think largely they're probably going to have to work along with these legal arguments, with the idea that they can't rely upon things moving in the Middle East. There's been wars and battles and proxy wars in the Middle East since day dot. Things might not move quickly in that sense. And I do think there are a lot more things that are pressing in those arguments and the relationship between those two countries than unlocking BN. And I do believe that BN unlocking is a consequence of the things that matter. And I think it's a little bit of a red herring in some ways, because it's the legal cases for me that once the legal cases with the WTO, etc., are dropped, then everything starts to fall into place and things get unlocked, such as BN. But until that happens, then we're kind of playing a waiting game. But I do think things are moving ahead of that. I do think things are changing. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. A lot of people are waiting to see what happens. People doing the deals, even the people who've got skin in the game or money, are playing the same waiting game as us. And it's so hard to have that patience. But if they can be patient, then so can we.
Toon 2020 says, is the custom and excise tax case still going on? And if so, does it affect the takeover?
Look, I think we're going back quite a while now for that. But looking back to last summer, I don't believe that it is. I think things got ironed out in that sense. That was my understanding, and I don't think it is an issue with regards to the takeover. But like Steve said, things will come out in the wash. And look, it is something. I think it's one of those fears that the football club has that could suddenly land on their doorstep one day. But yeah, these things take years. This isn't something that all of a sudden is going to happen.
Do you think Newcastle are preparing a contingency plan in case we get relegated?
The club themselves?
Yeah, that's what Stu was asking.
I don't think the club themselves are preparing for relegation. No, I don't think they are. I don't think they are at all. No, I think they're preparing. They're definitely preparing for a summer without a takeover. Now, that doesn't mean that's what they think will happen, but it would be really odd of them not to do that. So they are. I do know that they are preparing in case this doesn't happen before the summer. But do I believe that they're preparing? Look, they'll have to do their preparation just in case, but I don't believe they're really actively thinking that this club will get relegated.
Okay. Adam Telfer just says, can't believe people would blame the Premier League if we got relegated. That's not an excuse at all. We wouldn't have been good enough. End of. Fair play. Adam, yeah, I would agree. Eric Shun says, who's Liam's favourite Newcastle player? Mine is Miggy.
I do like Miguel Almiron, and I love the way he plays with a smile on his face. I love his graft. I love everything about him. But Callum Wilson's my favourite player by an absolute mile, to be honest, when I think about it, because he's a proper number 9. Forget the stupid 13 that's on his back. He's a proper number 9, and that would be it would be those two players and a couple of others, maybe a Dubravka, who would be the biggest travesty if they're the type of players you want to build a team around. But you would lose those type of players if relegation did play out.
James Douglas says, when we go down, not confident if Bruce is in charge, takeover hasn't happened, they still want to buy, does the owners and directors test still apply to the strictest test? I mean, it's a different division, isn't it? It
is, but they're largely aligned. So I've seen a couple of people tweeting me in the last few days. Sorry, everyone out there, I've been less than responsive because I've been on half-term kid duty. But I think they're largely aligned. Some people have been saying things like, well, it'll be easier for Newcastle United's deal to go through if they get relegated because they won't have to deal with the Premier League. It's not that easy. The tests are largely aligned between the Football League and the Premier League. So if it doesn't pass a Premier League test, it is highly unlikely to pass a Football League one as well.
Okay, Lisa 8 says, we've all been conned about Joe Linton, pure PR at the time. 40 million was including 5 years' wages at 20 million, agents' fees, etc. 5 million. Bet we paid 15 million. Still a disgrace, but it explains it. Yeah, I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, maybe it was just a shot across the bows at the departing Rafa,
I think that's really fanciful, those kind of figures. It wasn't. It was a fair chunk of that money paid up front. That's my understanding.
James Douglas says, Dwight Gale appeared to be reluctant to put himself about. Do you think he's worried picking up an injury that will impact on a future move?
Look, I think Dwight Gale is already planning his next move in football. I don't think he'll be in Newcastle United player next season. But I think it's a bit unfair to question his professionalism in that sense. I don't believe he's not putting himself into challenges in a February before a July move because he's thinking about that. No, I think that's a little bit unfair on the lad's professionalism.
Do you think that, as Tom Dixon has mentioned there, that they're thinking about cashing in on Joe Linton in the summer?
It wouldn't be a surprise, would it, Tom? If you think about it, I mean, cashing in is probably a really odd term to say. Cashing in feels like you've made a bonus.
Cashing out.
Cashing out, yes. Cashing in's like you've got a bit of a bonus, isn't it? Like you've got the money on top of it, but they ain't going to get anywhere near that for Joe Linton, and they'll be lucky to fob him off as a loan deal with an option, I would say, in the summer, and it'll probably be back to Germany. Or I know last summer there were a lot of teams in Turkey who were taking a look at him, but again, the type of money kicking around in Turkey is not the same as a lot of the other big European leagues. They promise a lot and deliver very little. So I would be surprised if he does end up in a Turkey that it'll just be a case of it'll be a promise of a 10 million deal or 15 down the line, and he'll just spend a loan out there, a year's loan. So that's the type of deals that you get from clubs in Turkey. So, but yeah, that's where a lot of the interest come from. I think it was Fenerbahce, if I remember rightly, Trabzonspor and a couple of others took a little look at Joe Linton, but I don't think the club were ever minded to let him go last summer. I think they thought they would let him have a run this year. He had a little run, not really any better over. He still looks so one-paced, it's unbelievable. Nowhere near a Premier League footballer.
Stu Penman says, me pizza joke will take some topping. Like Domino's, Stu, I always deliver, son. Neil McMillan says, what do you think of Bruce's comments on the back of the Shields Gazette? What comments were those, Liam? I mean, I presume it's just taken. I presume it maybe was just taken from his interview. He's, or maybe it's the fact that he's not going anywhere, soon.
I'm so sorry for my lack of professionalism, Neil, but I have no idea what was on the back of the Gazette today.
Maybe you'll have to let us know, mate. He's off. He's off. It's half term. Paul Gray says, for me, we've got to put Murphy in at right back. He's better than Kraft and will do better pace-wise against Man U. They'll murder us down their left if Kraft is playing. Yeah, I mean, it was quite evident in that first half against Chelsea that Chelsea had certainly done their homework and targeted Kraft almost immediately from kick-off, didn't they?
They did. They just got the ball. I mean, it was a definite ploy because Werner just dropped in and pulled out to the left, and they were playing diagonal balls out there constantly. It was embarrassing, to be honest, and that's why I was hinting at earlier that it upset us that they didn't see that 20 minutes in and go, you know what, we're going to have to switch this. Go to just to see it out at half time. Drop the wingers in and go back to a more compact system with some width. Pull Gale back down there on the right-hand side, or whoever it may be. Pull Almiron on the right-hand side. Put St. Maximin in on the left and just put Gale up front. But they didn't do anything like that. And like I say, I'm not a football manager. I can't analyse it all, but I think it was a deliberate ploy. With Jacob Murphy, he's a right winger, effectively. Much more of a right winger. But can he be any worse than what Emil Kraft was the other day? I would argue that he can't. And I think it probably is worth a go. One other interesting thing that might work is if you could put Isaac Hayden at right back. I hate taking him out of that midfield, but you could play an Isaac Hayden there. And I tell you what he would do, he'd defend properly. And that's exactly what they need. Kraft doesn't give it anything going forward, and he never stops crosses coming in. he's an absolute danger at right back. And I think he could cause us a lot of problems if we're stuck with him until Mankio comes back.
Northeast Lad says ASM or Ben Arthur? Ben Arthur for me.
I honestly don't even, good question in some ways, but it's not even a question. Hatem every day of the week.
Yeah, definitely. David Crone says a lot of fans think a takeover would be off if we go down. I think the opposite. The deal would fly through and cost a lot less. It's just whether Mike Ashley's prepared to negotiate, Liam, isn't it, on the price? I mean, he's getting too much for the club as it is. Be a hell of a loss to him, but then, it depends what his motives are and what he's motivated by and what his biggest concern is moving into, 2021, 22. Is it his retail business, or is it, trying to get Newcastle back up with the first attempt if they do go down, and getting the finances which come with the Premier League promotion?
I think it's all hypotheticals, really. It's really difficult to judge, but I just don't believe Mike Ashley will give the club away. He's never done that before. I just don't believe he'll give it away. And I think realistically, even if you add a little premium on for Newcastle United, which is what we're effectively looking at now, it isn't really, like you said, it isn't worth 315 to 20 million or whatever that sum may be. It isn't worth that, really. It's worth less than that. You see the likes of Southampton going for 200 million. Newcastle's a better club, of course. I'm not going down that avenue. But the thing is, they're a comparable Premier League club at present, have better infrastructure than Newcastle United in a lot of ways, and at least have a plan on the way that they play and managerial. They've got some value in their managerial team, etc. That's a big difference. More than 100 million, more than a third worth more. Newcastle United, as I've said, is a shell of a football club. And what's Newcastle United worth if they get relegated? Is it worth 250 million? Probably not. Is it worth 200 million? Probably not. It's probably worth between 150 and 200 million as a championship club, with no guarantee of coming back up. And I think that's probably been the thing that Mike Ashley might hang on to, is that if he just bankrolls it again, takes the money back over the next season when they come back up, which he's done previously, that Newcastle will bounce back up. And I think it will be a struggle, but you can never predict whether they won't come back up or not, because if they hang on to most of the players, recently in particular, most clubs who get relegated do tend to, if they don't bounce back up, they're in the top 6 in the Championship anyway. So it's another risk, but we know he rolls the dice, and I don't agree with it. I think there could be a lot of problems, but I'll be honest, I've kind of thought the same the last 2 relegations as well. I've gone into that summer thinking, this team, they've got nothing, they'll not come back up. And then by the end of the season, you're saying, well, they had a good squad, didn't they? They had the basis there. So I'm not going to sit here and predict that. You just can't.
Jason Carter brings up a topic which we've mentioned a couple of times already this week, and that's Lascelles. He's showing no leadership on the pitch. Jason says his football ability seems to be getting worse. What's your view on Lascelles?
I think probably from the moment it was made, it was one of Rafa Benitez's big things. It was a questionable choice. But I think we're that far down the line. I think Jamal Lascelles probably keeps that armband until the day he leaves Newcastle United. I think there's a fair argument to say that he isn't in the strongest back 4, which does have to bring up question marks about whether he's deserving of the armband. Is he as good a player as he was a couple of years ago? I think he's pretty similar, but I think Newcastle United tactically are less well drilled. I think he gets left open a lot more than he did previously. I like Jamal Lascelles. Look, I don't think he's the greatest footballer, but I do quite like him. I don't think he's as bad as some make out. But yes, he is. He can be exposed for pace. His marking in particular recently has been quite poor, actually. But I don't mind him as a footballer. As a leader, I do think he shows some leadership. I think he could be a bit stronger at the moment, but I think there's a lot in that dressing room could show a little bit more. I look at the likes of John Joe Shelby, who's played with top clubs. I look at others, and I think they could be showing leadership.
Well, that takes us to John's question. Good evening, John. He says, Liam, any idea why Bruce plays Shelby? Surely running about is a prerequisite for a Premier League midfielder. I mean, I've criticised Shelby time and time again, mate. You know I'm not his biggest fan. One good game in 10 or 15, as it is now, is just not good enough for me. And there's far better midfielders capable of playing in there. I think we could find a much better combination. And, I said last night, I made a point of it last night, defending starts at the front in any level of football. And, Callum Wilson does do that. Dwight Gale didn't really seem interested. Shelby doesn't graft his backside off in that position in midfield. So your spine of your team is, at the weekend, or when we played Chelsea, was Gale, Shelvey, Lascelles. It's weak. It's weak as water. Do you know what I mean? And that for me doesn't help, and it puts pressure on the whole team when people aren't pulling their weight.
But it's a problem, Steve, we've been talking about for 5 years now, isn't it? Like, does he pull his weight in that midfield? And I think the answer is no. You can forgive a bad patch in a player's time, but John Joe Shelvey, I would argue, has probably only had 2 purple patches in his time at Newcastle United. He had that, and let's be brutally honest about this, he had that from around September to December in the championship season, where he was unplayable, and he really, really looked up for it. And I would say last season, he had a real purple patch where he scored goals, and he looked like a proper midfielder, and he put it in a bit. And I think that's a big problem, and that's why a lad who's got ability, again, very, very one-paced, I don't think he would ever make it at a top club, because you've just got to have a little bit more about you in that position. We're stuck with him. Is there anybody who could replace him? I mean, I'd be interested to know. Come back on and see who you would pick in that midfield. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Jeff Hendrick either. I don't think either of them particularly add anything to the Newcastle United midfield. But then you look beyond that and you say, who does? I've said before, Hayden could easily be moved into the back line if it was up to me. Willock's looked decent. Matty Longstaff, for me, gets a raw deal. He's somebody who's got to come in. I think he's got to play him. Sean Longstaff has done nothing this season, has almost regressed and gone backwards, and you've got to add question marks. But again, I don't think he's the disaster that everybody's painting him out to be. And I think Steve Bruce is scapegoated Sean Longstaff. But it was nice to see him return to the squad, because I don't like that kind of behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, God knows what's gone on in that dressing room, but it certainly affected his ability to pick his best team, I think. And John will give him the comment just following on from his question, which is, he says we should play ASM, Fraser and Almiron, then Willock, Matty and Hayden. So everyone's got an opinion, but I think a lot of people would like to see Matty and Hayden back in there. They didn't do anything wrong when the team.
That's quite a dynamic front six. If you have the rules quite loose, who are all in a lot of interchange, and that's a really dynamic front six. Obviously, it's got negatives. It hasn't got a proper centre forward, but I like the look of that. I don't see why going to Manchester United, Newcastle United can't cause plenty of problems with that kind of team.
I mean, Paul Gray says, for me, Shelvey brings everyone down. Look what he did to both Longstaffs. Willock was not really in the game against Chelsea as well as Hayden. I'm sick of Shelvey throwing his arms up and blaming others. Malcolm MacDonald's made the point on the show before as well that, Shelvey is one of them who, he says, senior pros sometimes, if they don't like playing with somebody, he'll make others look bad. And he said he's convinced he's seen Shelvey do that on more than one occasion to Sean Longstaff. Doesn't like playing with him, sees him as competition, so puts a bad ball in to make him look bad. I mean, it's a hell of an accusation to make, but I think only an ex-professional can make it. Do you know what I mean? Because Malcolm's played in teams where he's seen it done. As I say, that's Malcolm's opinion. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm not a fan of Shelvey. I wouldn't be upset if he was dropped and we didn't see him again. But that's my opinion. Some people really like Shelvey. Some people think he's one of our key players. We should be building around him. So that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Roger Cook says, I agree. Liam and Steve, Shelvey doesn't have enough at all. Yes, he can make a good ball now and again, but that's not enough. Joe Walker says, John Joe has been caught over his shoulder for goals. His running is non-existent. His Hollywood ball isn't there, and his delivery is woeful. And,
I know like the delivery is doing my head in when his delivery has been really bad recently, and that's something that he's effectively on the pitch for. Largely is to make sure that those deliveries don't hit the first man. And he's done that quite a bit. Sometimes it's not even the first man because there isn't a man on the post, etc. But it's just lift it and get it in there and give your players. Newcastle isn't a very big side at the moment. They lack a little bit of height and a little bit of power, which is why I think Lascelles works, because he has got that. But give Kieran Clark, who's a fantastic goal scorer and a good finisher with his head, give him half a chance. Give Lascelles half a chance. They're not doing that. They've never even got close to doing that the other day, even though they had a few corners.
Yeah. A lot of people talking about our inabilities at set pieces, how bad we are at throw-ins. Andy Jones says one of our strong points was defending corners. Now I worry every time the opposition get one. I think a lot of that's been down to the injuries, that we've suffered in those positions as well, but lack of coaching. The photograph that was doing the rounds from the club website, I think, though, tells you that it's Graham Jones. I don't know what the situation was here, but Graham Jones, everyone seems to be listening to him and listening to what he says. So at least there is something going on the training ground. There is, the players do seem to be taking it in. You've just got to put that into practice. Last 4 minutes of the show, mate. So let's just talk about Manchester United away. Steve Bruce, of course, going back to his former club on Sunday evening. It's a 7 o'clock kickoff. It's live on BT Sport. Don't get excited, but Jeff Hendrick returns to the squad following his one-match ban. Fabian Schär, of course, Javier Manquillo and Callum Wilson are all still injured and unavailable for the game. Maybe's tired legs will play their part, of course. Manchester United are in the Europa League action on Thursday night. They're playing an away tie against Porto in Turin. No real team news as of yet. Obviously, we'll be getting Bruce's press conferences and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's press conference nearer the game on Sunday. Only other news to give you this early on is that Paul Tierney will be refereeing, and VAR, which has been very controversial over the last few weeks especially, is monitored by Stuart Atwell. It's not a happy hunting ground. It's a bit like deja vu. It's what I said about the Chelsea game. Obviously, in the last game against Manchester United, we lost 4-1. Matty Longstaff, of course, scored the consolation goal. How do you see it going, mate?
It's just one of those fixtures when you look at the fixture list at the start of the season, whether Manchester United are playing well or badly. As you mentioned, last season they had an iffy season and walked over Newcastle United in that game. It's just one of those fixtures you really don't look forward to. It's one of those games that you'll effectively write off before you've even kicked the ball. If Newcastle United get a result out of it, and this is no reflection on the way they've been playing recently, they'd be doing really, really, really well. I think the tired legs thing. Look, we've played loads of teams who've had European football. It doesn't seem to have an impact on when they play us. So I'm not going to read too much into that. One thing I would have a little bit of hope for is it would be really good to see a Federico Fernandez come back. And I think if a Federico Fernandez is fit, like I hinted at earlier, you could potentially see a switch to a 5. Steve Bruce has said recently he doesn't see the idea, especially with Jones pulling the strings largely, of switching between 4s and 5s. But I wouldn't argue against switching to a 5 in this game if you've got a Federico Fernandez fit. And like I say, then you could bring a Jacob Murphy in who could play as right wing back. That would be my look on things. But I don't know. It's an impossible one. But it's one of those games that look, it's. I said on when I was talking last week, I think I said Chelsea is a par score. Chelsea's a 2-0 defeat par score, and that's what they got. I think Manchester United's probably might be a little bit worse than that. And given our record against them, it might be a 3-0 would be a par score. To be honest, in the type of results that we've had there over the years, a 3-0 or a 3-1 potentially. Because they do score goals against Newcastle United, they always have. I don't really hold up many hopes. And I think that my last minute or so talk, and I'll probably dispel any of those commenters out there who think I'm like the eternal optimist. But no, I would imagine if I was to sit here and predict a result at the moment, I would say probably a 3-0 defeat.
Damage limitation, keep the goals tally down, make sure that we don't get hammered. That's the key, really. I wouldn't complain if you went there defensively. Focus on the next game as well, really. We need 3 points in the next game. Quick one from Dave Harrison. Is it right if Almiron plays for his national team, he's going to have to isolate for 14 days on his return, Liam? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, my colleague Miles, I think, wrote. I did see that when I was looking around social media briefly today that he did speak about that. He wrote a piece in the Shields Gazette today about international protocol and the rules, isolation rules, that he would face 14-day isolation, or 10 days it may well be. 10 days seems to be the norm at the moment. So it could be a 10-day isolation when he comes back from international duty. And I'll be brutally honest with you, I'm certain he'll go on international duty, because why wouldn't he? That's the type of thing that the players do, and that's the ultimate thing for somebody like him. He wants to play for Paraguay. He also wants to play for Newcastle United. I know he is enjoying his time at this football club, but I don't think they'll take away his right to play international football, and that could cause problems for Newcastle United.
Yeah, don't forget Loaded Football Weekly. Join Daz, Martin and Chris at 9 o'clock tonight. They will be bringing you all the football from around the world. Liam, enjoy the rest of your half term, mate. Same as me. It's a long road, mate, but it's only 1 week.
It is. We'll get there.
We will, mate. Take care. I'll see you next Tuesday. Take care, pal. Good night.
Yes.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna